computer.
Okay, thank you.
After recording on your laptop, then we can move that one to the cloud and then share it with Akshay Prabhu so that he can upload it on the YouTube.
Okay, Prabhu. I'll send it to with the PowerPoint. I'll send you the recording with us, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. So second chapter, contents of the Gita, summarized. So how is it connected to the first chapter? So in the first chapter, we just saw that Arjun gave 5 reasons for which he is doubtful about engaging in the battle. And then he concludes by saying, Govinda, I will not fight. So that's where we left off at. In the second chapter, Krishna will refute each of these reasons, giving authoritative references and attempt to convince Arjun to fight. And while doing so, Krishna will also provide a high-level general summary of the entire Bhagavad Gita, which is why the chapter 2 is called Contents of the Gita Summarized. So Krishna does both. He will refute the reasons, and also in refuting, he will provide a high-level summary of the Gita. So the second chapter is the second longest chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. It has 72 verses, and it is divided into 5 sections. The first section is Arjun's surrender. The second section is Gyan. Third is Karma. The fourth is Nishkam Karma. And the fifth is Sthita Pragya. Sthita Pragya, which we'll do a little bit more later on, but it means how does one who is not bewildered situated? What are the symptoms of one who is equipoised and balanced? So let's look at the first section, and each of these are summaries of the 3 sections of the Bhagavad Gita. So the second section is the summary of the last 6 chapters. Gyan. So we did the 3 sections, which is Karma, Bhakti, and Gyan. So the second section is the summarization of chapters 13 to 18. The third section, Karma, summarization of the first 6 chapters. And the fourth section, which is Nishkam Karma, is a summarization of the middle 6 chapters of Bhakti. So let's look at the first section, which is really the first 10 verses of the chapter. So we see Arjun here, he's speaking from a moral perspective. So everything that Arjun is saying is from the scriptures. He's not saying that I feel or because I think, but he's speaking actually from Dharma Shastra. According to different levels of Shastras, there can be different realizations. So just in terms of Artha Shastra, which deals more with politics and economics, the recommendation is that if somebody is stealing from you, you should kill the person. If somebody is attacking you, you should defend yourself, regardless. But Arjuna is taking a higher position over here. He's speaking from Dharma Shastra, which talks about the importance of forgiveness, talks about the importance of renunciation, of being respectful to the elders. And he showed his mood of humility. He has said that I don't know how to move my picture. Is this helping? So we see his humility also. He says that it is better for me to live by begging I don't really care for the kingdom. So he's detached, he's humble, and he's magnanimous, right? So he's willing to, even though he has been wronged and cheated, but he's saying better for them to kill us than for us to engage in this ghastly warfare. And then he's respectful. He's saying that how can I kill personalities like Bhishma and Drona? They are I don't know how to change. So Indulekha is, I think Indulekha is saying that the part of a slide is being covered by my picture. You must be all also facing the same problem, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So apparently you can move it down yourself. You can
Actually,
drag it.
yeah, nothing is covering, bro.
Okay.
We can see the.
Okay.
Yeah. You can minimize it. Yeah.
Okay. And then we see this deference. He says, Bhishma is my grandfather, right? How can I kill my grandfather? Drona is my guru. So we see all these good qualities in Arjun. And what is it getting him? So the outcome of it is, and this is Arjun himself sharing, he says that I'm confused. I have lost my composure. And I am imbued with miserly weakness. And then he says, I have no means for driving away this grief that is agitating my senses. So we see Arjun's dilemma over here. He seems to be doing the right thing, but the outcome is not resonating with his intentions. Generally speaking, when you do the right thing, even though it may not give you happiness or pleasure, but it definitely gives you satisfaction. And here, Arjuna is experiencing the opposite of satisfaction. But because of these good qualities, Krishna agrees to speak to Arjuna to dissipate his doubts. So what makes Arjuna a suitable recipient of Gita? So we see that he is compassionate. He's compassionate to himself. Why? Because he is not being stoic, that like I have to do my duty, whether I have to shoot arrows at my friends and family. So he's compassionate to himself, and he's compassionate to the society. He's saying that Varna Sankar, the society might be destroyed, and he's ultimately compassionate to even his enemies. That why should I kill them? And then we discuss that moral. Everything that he speaks is as per the scriptures. But the biggest qualification that he has is that he's willing to take shelter. So while Arjuna is saying all this, Krishna is simply listening to him. But when Arjuna says that now I am a spirit soul surrendered unto you, and no one but you can drive away this miserly weakness, then Krishna begins to speak the Gita. So good qualities are definitely helpful, but what makes Arjuna ultimately a recipient of Gita, and this applies to us, what makes us able to receive Gita is this mood of surrender to Krishna. And surrender means that at least we aspire to do it. It may be a journey, but at least we are aspiring to develop that mood. So that was the end of the first section, in which we witnessed Arjuna expressing his moral dilemma, his indecisiveness, and ultimately surrendering to Krishna. So we come to the second section, which is Krishna instructing Arjuna on the platform of Gyan. So the very first instruction that Krishna gives to Arjuna, the very first instruction in the Bhagavad Gita is that you are not the body, but a spirit, soul. And Krishna explains this using empirical observations to make this point. So we also see Krishna's humility over here, that Krishna is Krishna and everything that he says is absolute. But even though Arjuna has surrendered, he is still saying that you can yourself observe, and that way you can validate that which I am telling you. So what's the observation that he's asking Arjuna to make? That the body of everybody changes from childhood to youth to old age, but the person remains the same. So this is the famous changing body diorama. Srila Prabhupada loved this one, which shows this point of how from birth to death our body changes, but we do not change. And Prabhupada used to have this trick with children that he would ask them, where's your nose? Where's your eye? Where's your ear? And they would point at the nose and eye and ear. And then he would say, where are you? And then the children would suddenly freeze. And of course, then he would laugh and he says, you are in there, you're the soul. So Krishna is making that point, that empirically you can see the body changing, but you are not changing, which means that you are not the body. And then he makes several propositions that can help distinguish the body from the soul. These are no longer empirical, but he makes this proposition for us and Arjuna to understand the difference between the body and the soul. So he says the body is material and the soul is spiritual. The body is constantly changing, the soul never changes. The body is temporary, the soul is permanent. The body is destructible and the soul is indestructible. But ultimately, one has to accept this on faith, because all these propositions are there to convince one who is willing to be convinced. So if I say that I accept what you're saying, but help me understand it, then these propositions can help. But if one simply says, I don't accept what you're saying, that yeah, the body changes, but that does not mean there is a soul in there. It's just the biochemical process of aging. And since you haven't seen the spirit soul, you cannot say that it is indestructible or permanent. So which is why Prabhupada mentions that there has to be a notion of faith in accepting the Bhagavad Gita. And then Krishna explains the relationship between the body and the soul by the analogy of the person changing clothes. He said, just as a person discards old clothes and puts on new ones, similarly, the soul discards one body and puts on others. So this, he is introducing Arjuna to the concept of reincarnation. Because he has already made this difference between the body and the soul, the natural question is that what happens to the soul when the body is destroyed? The soul is indestructible. Krishna explains that it takes on another body. Now this is the only time in the Gita that Krishna speaks about the nature of the soul. He'll never speak about it again. And even though the second chapter is considered to be a summary of things that will appear, but it's not an exact and precise summary. It's more a topical summary, because this notion of the nature of the soul, the distinction between the body and the soul, does not appear later on. And the reason is that if one does not accept this, then one will not understand anything later on. So if one accepts this and moves on, there's no reason to restate it. If one does not accept it and move on, restating is not going to help the person. So this is one of those necessary conditions. So Krishna will not speak about it later on. Okay, so this is the first verse in this chapter. That is for, I did say one verse per chapter, but this is a long chapter with many verses. So this has 2 verses in it. And one of the widely quoted verses of the Bhagavad Gita in this chapter, Natva evam jatunasham, natvam neme janadipaha, nachevyana bhavishyama, sarve vayam taha param. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So this verse establishes the existence of a eternal spirit soul distinct from the temporary material body. This is the basis of the section that talks about Gyan, also called Sankhya. Okay, so before we start with the third section, I'll just pause and see if anybody has any comments. Yes, so let me go. I have Balaka. Balaka, you have a question?
Yes, please. So we know that the soul does not change, but I mean, the soul is basically the consciousness. But like even in our this life, there will be time when our like maybe this, I mean, our thoughts and feelings, some sort of subtle body will change. So how can you explain that? Like because the subtle body is carried over. So can you explain that? How can we see that the I mean, what is the position of the subtle body versus the soul, and what is exactly our identity? I know soul is, but if you can little bit elaborate on this, that will be really good.
Sure, thank you. It's a wonderful question. So things like our mind and our intelligence and our sense of self-awareness, these are symptoms of the soul and not necessarily intrinsic to the soul. So just like the growth in the physical body, the animation of the physical body, these are symptoms of the soul. So when the soul leaves the body, when we see the body starts decaying. Now it does not mean that the vitality in the body is the soul. What it means is that the vitality in the body is the symptom of the soul. So similarly, at a subtle level, things like mind and intelligence, these are also symptoms of the soul, but they are material. So being material, they are subject to whatever material, the nature of material things, which means that they will change, they're non-permanent, they're transient, they're influenced by material considerations. Okay, does that help, Balak?
Yes, it does help, but also we know that the subtle body is carried over. So what is carried over? Like I know I understand that if this is material, then I mean in my this life, this when my body is no longer there, those things also should be not carried over. But like when you say that the subtle body is what things are carried over, that's what the self-awareness or intelligence are. These are supposed to be carried over, right?
They are carried over. Subtle body is composed of 3 things: mind, intelligence, and false ego.
Right.
And the subtle body is material, but it keeps traveling with the soul as long as the soul is in the material realm. Now, sometimes we confuse mind and intelligence with remembrance or with memories. So sometimes people say the subtle body is being carried over, then because mind and intelligence is recording memories, so we should have collective memories, or if I learn a language in this life, I should remember the language in the next life. But later on, Krishna actually says that now again, from a strictly Sankhya perspective, that statement is true. The subtle body does record everything and carry it. But Krishna, out of mercy to the soul, he also bestows remembrance and forgetfulness. So because of the influence of Paramatma, the subtle body forgets. But it still carries impressions. That is why there are people who are naturally inclined to things. There are some people who even, and as parents, we can all relate to it, that even before children are fully interacting with things, they're already showing a propensity. Maybe some children like music, some children enjoy a more peaceful environment. These are just the swabhav that they are carrying over. So they definitely carry impressions. But Krishna, and Prabhupada talks about this, that this is Krishna's mercy that he makes us forget. Because if we carry the collective memories, all the sufferings that we have had, all the complexity of the relationships that we had to navigate through, not just this lifetime, but previous lifetime, previous to previous lifetime, it would not be possible for the jiva to function. So Krishna, by his mercy, he suppresses those memories, and he gives it back to us later on. Generally, it is said that when you go back to Godhead, when you go back to the spiritual world, then Krishna gives us those memories back. But by that time, they're of no use to them. The only use they have at that time is that they play like a horror movie. We see all the material entrapments we went through, material engagements. We see how we debased the soul, how we turned our back to Krishna. So at that time, our resolve to not do the same mistake gets stronger at the time. But yes, within these lifetimes, those memories, those skills that we acquire, they're mostly suppressed.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay. Akshay Prabhu? Or maybe it's from before. I think Sunil Prabhu is also from before. Sunil Prabhu, you had a question, or it's just that your hand is from before?
So, Prabhu, I have a question.
Yes, Prabhu, go ahead.
Yeah, Prabhuji, you mentioned about the body, which is like, intelligence, mind and ego. And so how does, like, in terms of soul, where does it, like, when we talk about heart, so how do we differentiate between soul and the heart, and, where does it reside? I mean, we sometimes say that Krishna is in every devotee's heart. And so is it the soul or heart? How do you differentiate? How exactly that is?
So it's generally said that Krishna, the soul and the super soul, which is the jiva and the Paramatma, they reside in the region of the heart. So given that they are completely spiritual, they cannot be anchored to anything material. So sometimes people say the soul is in the heart. And if you open the heart, can you see the soul? You can't, because the soul is spiritual, Krishna is spiritual. But the understanding is, and this will be spoken a little bit more in the 6th chapter, that the yogis, by the process of yoga, Ashtanga yoga, they are able to distill the presence of the soul and the super soul within their body and view it. So the general understanding is, as I said, that they are in the region of the heart. Okay, thank you. Good questions. So we can now move on to the third section, which is karma. So we did the first section, which is Arjun surrender and Krishna accepting him. We did the second section, which is Sankhya, which is essentially Krishna talking about the nature of the soul. The third section is karma. And karma by nature is complicated, and we can see that Krishna makes full use of it. So he gives Arjun different what if scenarios in this section. And then he says, you can do two things. You can either do your karma, which is fight, or not do your karma, which is not fight. If you fight, you may either win or you may lose. If you win, then you become the emperor of the earth. And after ruling for a long time, you go back to heaven. If you lose, then you will be killed in the course of the execution of your duty. And because of this, you will immediately go back to heaven. So if you fight, whether you win or you, in all scenarios, whether you win or you lose, the outcome is auspicious. You either immediately go back to heaven or you rule the earth and then go back to heaven. The second option is you do not fight. And then he says, if you do not fight, then you're neglecting your Kshatriya dharma of fighting. And because of that, you go to hell. Second is that you will lose respect. That Arjuna is famous everywhere as the greatest warrior. And he says people will make fun of you. That how you ran away from the battlefield. And that is actually, infamy is worse than death. And you will set a bad example for others. So others will say that this great warrior Arjun, he turned back on his duty and ran away. So it's okay for me to also do that. So that will be the downfall of the society, where people will whimsically start turning the back to their prescribed duties, and the society will be in disarray. So from all perspectives, if you do not fight, the outcome is not good. You go to hell, you are disrespected, and you actually cause the downfall of the society. So in doing so, Krishna is also negating the reasons that Arjuna had given not to fight. So if you remember, we had said in the second chapter, Krishna will address Arjuna's reasons not to fight, while at the same time giving a summary of the Gita. So the first reason Arjuna had given was compassion. That how can I be the cause of the death of others? And Krishna negates it through Sankhya. So he says that the material body is sure to be destroyed and the spirit soul is indestructible. So how can you kill that which cannot be killed? And how can you save that cannot be saved? So your compassion is misplaced. If you think that by not killing Drona and Bhishma, they will live forever, you are wrong. Because ultimately, they will die. Or if you think that if I kill Bhishma and Drona, they will cease to exist, that is also wrong. Because their soul is eternal. Now, Prabhupada mentions that this, of course, does not allow for indiscriminate killing. Everything that is being said is in the context of dharma. That as long as you're abiding by the religious principles. So now he has defeated Arjun's doubts regarding compassion. His second doubt was enjoyment. That everybody will be dead. Who will I enjoy with? And Krishna says that if you fight and win, then you will enjoy an unrivaled kingdom on earth and then enjoy heaven. If you do not fight, then you will be disrespected and you will be minimized. So, in fighting, you have the real enjoyment available to you, and in not fighting, you have the opposite of enjoyment. Third was fear of sinful reaction. So, Krishna says that as a Kshatriya, it's your duty to fight. So, if you win or lose, you go to heaven. But if you do not fight, that's when you should be concerned about the sinful reaction, and that's when you are destined to go to hell. So he's saying, Arjun, you were saying that by fighting you will incur sinful reactions, but actually by not fighting, you will incur sinful reactions. And then the fourth point that he had made was destruction of society. So Krishna negates that point by saying that if you do not fight, you are setting a bad example for others. They will also whimsically give up their prescribed duties, and that is the real cause of the downfall of the society. So in this way, Krishna has methodically dismantled the reasons. So there were 5 reasons, and he has dismantled 4 reasons. Now, strictly speaking, if we were to look at it as a transaction, that Arjun had doubts, Krishna came and addressed the doubts, Arjun should have now said, okay, all my doubts have been cleared, you have addressed them, I'll go ahead and fight. Now that does not happen. Why? Because the 5th reason has not been addressed, which is indecisiveness, where Arjun says, I do not know. So by logic, you can explain but not convince. And in order to address the last reason, the rest of the Bhagavad Gita is spoken, because all his other doubts have already been cleared. But yet, he is not convinced. So this is the difference between hearing something and then internalizing it. And this is something that we will also experience in our relationship with the Gita. That we'll read the 2nd chapter, we will see that Krishna says that you're not the body but the soul. We'll accept it intellectually. But it will take us a long time where we truly accept it as a basis of existence. And that's when our whole perspective to life will completely change. So this is one of the slides that you need to remember is how does Krishna address the first 4 reasons for Arjun's not to fight. Now, even though Krishna has addressed these reasons, there is still an underlying problem. So Krishna has proposed karma and sankhya, that do your duty and know that you're not the body. But karma has problems. The benefits of karma are temporary. So you do something good will happen to you, and that is the end of the karma cycle. Then karma, by its very nature, binds one to the material body, because the soul needs the material body to enjoy or suffer the fruits of karma. So Prabhupada says that even if you desire one laddu, you'll have to take a birth again, because you'll need a body and a tongue to enjoy that laddu. And then people would laugh and say, that's why you should eat all the laddus that you can. But that's the problem with karma, that it is temporary, it binds one to the material body, and it is very difficult to abide by the scriptures. The Karma Kand part of the Vedas, they're very exhaustive and very, very pedantic. Do this, don't do this. At this time, you should do this. In this situation, you do this. So even in the earlier yugas, it was difficult. In this yuga, it is almost impossible. So that's the problem with karma. The problem with Sankhya, which is Gyan, is that it is very difficult to sustain because it is completely intellectual. But the nature of our senses is that they need engagement. So one can only sit and read and think about it and intellectually distill things for so long. Ultimately, they will need some engagement. They will need to talk with somebody to discuss. That's why there is all those societies of like-minded people. There are computer scientists that come together, and then there are aeronautical engineers. So these are all intellectual people, but they need to be able to engage. And then it's the intrinsic nature to seek pleasures. So because of these two reasons, the solutions that Krishna has given to Arjuna are not tenable. So Krishna is also ready to solve the problem, which will take us to the 4th section of the Bhagavad Gita. But let me pause here and see if there is any discussion. Yes, Chetan Prabhu.
Prabhu, here I have a question. Like, why is fear of losing respect? Why does that have to be a reason in our decision making? Like, what action to do and what not to do, what duty to perform and what not to perform. Like, I understand we are on the platform of false ego, so for us it may be applicable, but why is it applicable for someone like Arjuna?
So Arjuna was actually, so all the reasons that he was giving, they were on the material platform, right? So he was talking about happiness and material happiness. That I have my friends, I have my family, I have fun with them. If I kill all of them, then who will I enjoy with? And then Krishna makes the point that if you don't kill them, then they will actually lose respect for you. So the happiness that you're trying to seek by not killing them will actually be taken away by the fact that they will develop disrespect for you. So Arjuna's reasons are material, and Krishna's refutations are also material.
Okay.
Okay. So let's move on to the 4th section, where there is this implicit problem about the inherent deficiencies of karma and yeah. And Krishna is now going to solve that problem. So under Sankhya or Gyan, the proposition is that you're not the body. Under karma, the proposition is do your duty. And we have seen that in both these cases, there are shortcomings. That simply under Sankhya, you're not your body. The person is unable to sustain this state of vacuum. And in karma, do your duty, the person suffers from the temporary nature of karma and its binding nature. So Krishna gives the solution that why don't you combine both of these? Which means that do your duty from the platform that you are not the body. So this is what is called as Nishkama Karma. So the Sankhya aspect, the Gyan aspect, will establish you in this position that if you're not the body, then you're not the doer and you're not the enjoyer. So there is no kam. Kam means lust or desire. So there is no kam. But because the senses need enjoyment, the senses need engagement, which is provided by karma. So both of them together give you this platform in which you get the best of the two worlds. That you're able to get the enjoyment and the engagement out of karma, but Sankhya gives you this freedom from the binding nature of karma. It gives you freedom from the devolving cycle of karma, the nature of karma, that it keeps forcing you to enjoy or suffer more and more. So this is the essence of the fourth section. So it's called by different names. So Krishna calls it Buddhi Yoga. The same thing is also called Nishkam Karma. And the same thing is also Bhakti Yoga. So they are all pointing to the same notion. And there is this famous verse here. This is the second verse in this context that needs to be memorized. 247. Karmanyevadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala heturbhur ma te sangostva karmani. You have the right to perform a prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the result of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. So we see that both the notions of Sankhya and Karma are over here. The right to perform a prescribed duty is Karma. Not entitled to the fruits of action, Sankhya. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, Sankhya. Never be attached to not doing your duty, Vikram. Karma. Okay. So because this is such an important notion that that expands more later on, so let's have a little bit of discussion on Buddhi Yoga, which I said is also synonymous to Bhakti Yoga and Nishkam Karma Yoga. So the primary focus in Buddhi Yoga is to act for the pleasure of Krishna. And this is essentially karma that is performed on the platform of Bhakti. Now at this point, Krishna does not speak about all this because he is speaking at a higher level of abstraction. But he's introducing the notion of Buddhi Yoga to Arjuna. That yes, there is something that you can do by which you can get the best of both the worlds. And the other topics that the primary focus is to act for the pleasure of Krishna, that he will speak much later on when he starts speaking about the various aspects of Bhakti. But essentially Buddhi Yoga is karma that is performed on the platform of Bhakti. And the advantage of being situated in Buddhi Yoga is that it goes to the essence of the Vedas. This is the point Krishna makes, that the Vedas, they talk about so many things. They'll talk about so many kinds of karmas, so many kinds of activities, pious, impious, do this, don't do this. But then there is the Vedanta. The Vedanta is what is the essence? Ant means the end or the summary. What is the essence of the Vedas? And where do all these billions of words of the Veda end? And that is Buddhi Yoga. So instead of traveling the long journey of the different limbs and trees of the Vedas, Krishna is taking Arjuna directly to the root, the essence of the Vedas. And it protects the devotee in all circumstances. In fact, Krishna says that even a little bit in this area, even a very, very little bit of it, he says that I guarantee you, you will get a human form of life, which is very difficult to get. But he says, even if you do a little bit, half-heartedly, without much interest, superficially, but it is so potent that it is at least going to assure you another opportunity to make spiritual advancements. Because in the human form, that's the only form that you can make spiritual advancements. So Krishna becomes so excited when he says that this person is trying to do something good. Let me give him another chance. Even though the person may have done activities which may have, just in the purview of karma, forced him to take the body of an animal or a plant or fall to lower planetary systems. But little practice of Buddhi Yoga will give that protection. And the other two we have discussed, there is no artificial renunciation because you're performing activities, the senses are happily engaged, and then there are no binding reactions because you're not doing anything for yourself. The reactions come when there is the aham mameti, that I'm doing for my pleasure. But here the activities that you're doing is Krishna is the doer and Krishna is the enjoyer. So there is no binding reaction. So at this point, even though it's not there in the chapter, but it's a concept that is very important. So I wanted to speak a little bit about expanding on the concept of dharma. Because earlier on we have defined dharma as paradharma. So we define dharma as the intrinsic quality of the soul, the duty of the soul. But in the preceding verses, Krishna has also spoken about Kshatriya dharma. Now the soul is not Kshatriya for obvious reasons. So there is something else that is going on. So that is something that let us investigate. So dharma is divided into two parts. One is called swadharma and the other is called paradharma. Swadharma is the dharma based on your varnashram. So if you are a Kshatriya, you have a dharma. If you have a grahastha, you have a dharma. And the activities in these dharma are executed on the platform of karma. Now, as one becomes more and more purified by strictly following their swadharma over millions and millions of births, the person then reaches the point of paradharma, where the person does activities only for the pleasure of Krishna. So this is how these two dharmas are relate to one another. That one is, so it's still called dharma because it belongs to that varnashram. So it is the intrinsic nature of that varnashram. It's not the intrinsic nature of the soul anymore. So it's like if you in an organization, there is a job position. Job position is that of a computer programmer. So there is a specific job description that is attached to that job position. Now, different people may occupy it, or a person may occupy that position for some time, they get promoted, and then go on to another position. So the job description of that position does not change, but the person might take different job descriptions. So it is still called dharma, but it is intrinsic to that position. So a Brahman and a brahmachari, so a person who is as a varna is a Brahman, and in an ashram is a brahmachari. There is a specific dharma attached to that. And when a person is in that position, that becomes the person's swadharma. Now, when the person gets married, he's not a brahmachari anymore. His swadharma changes. And he then inherits the swadharma of a Brahman grihastha. So that is why the word dharma is still applicable, but it is not applied to the person, but to the position. Paradharma, which is executed on the platform of bhakti, is independent of anything external. It is attached to the soul. That is why it is considered to be paradharma. Now, in usage, generally these prefixes are not used. The word dharma is interchangeably used, and then one uses the context to derive that whether what is being spoken is swadharma or paradharma. So that is why this understanding is important. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita will take us through these interactions of swadharma and paradharma. So what he will actually ask us to do is to reverse the order. That instead of going through the path of swadharma and after many births taking to the path of paradharma, he will say that take to paradharma right away on the platform of bhakti, and as part of paradharma, you can perform your swadharma. Now again, this is not spoken in the second chapter, but for the sake of completeness, I'm saying it because it helps a lot when we for instance, the next chapter, third chapter is Karma Yoga, right? That Karma Yoga, even it's called, dharma is used there, but the dharma there is always pointing to swadharma over there. So that's why understanding this is important. And ultimately what Krishna wants us to do is have just one dharma, which is paradharma. That you have only one and only one obligation, which is the worship of Krishna in the process of bhakti. So quick comparison side by side of paradharma and swadharma. Paradharma is dharma of the soul. Swadharma is dharma of the body. Paradharma is unchangeable. Swadharma changes. Paradharma is universal. Swadharma is based on varna and ashram. The effect of paradharma is eternal. That is why Krishna says that you practice buddhi yoga and it will help you forever. But the effect of swadharma is temporary. That you do something pious, and once we enjoy the reactions to the pious activities, they are expunged. They are gone. The reaction is temporary. Paradharma gives liberation. Swadharma gives you repeated births, because you will be forced to take body again and again to enjoy or suffer the reactions of your activities. Paradharma is meant for those who are aspiring spiritualists. Swadharma is for materialists. Paradharma is practiced by bhakti. Swadharma is practiced by karma. This is one way of understanding the difference between karma and bhakti. Paradharma can be aligned to swadharma by the practice of yukta vairagya. So one can perform one's prescribed duty and offer it as devotional service, which is called yukta vairagya. And swadharma can also be aligned to paradharma through Daivi Varnashram. So I just put it over there, not to speak too much about it. Venkat Prabhu, I'll see you. When I am at a break, I'll ask. I'll give you a chance. Then Paradharma is based on Vedanta. So we said that the essence of the Vedas, and Swadharma is based on the bulk of the Vedas. So 95% of the Vedas speak about Swadharma. They speak about Karma Kanda, what to do, what not to do in order to enjoy, in order to get a birth in a higher planet. And Paradharma is based on the essence of the Vedas, the Vedanta, which is surrender to Krishna. So summarizing it, that dharma is we have already considered this, is the intrinsic quality or duty. Swadharma is the intrinsic duty of varna and ashram. Paradharma is the intrinsic duty of the soul. Bhagavad Gita explains Swadharma, which is karma, Paradharma, which is bhakti, and the knowledge to distinguish between them, which is jnana. So now the three sections of Bhagavad Gita make sense. So we said the three sections of Bhagavad Gita are karma, bhakti, and jnana. So the first section will talk about Swadharma. The second section will talk about Paradharma. And the third section will talk about how to distinguish between them, with the understanding that once you are able to distinguish them, then you will be inspired to follow the path of Paradharma as opposed to Swadharma. So this is what will be the ultimate recommendation of Krishna. That he'll say that you reject all your Swadharmas and only follow Paradharma. So the famous verse of the Bhagavad Gita, where Sarv Dharma Pratyajay, when he says Sarv Dharma Pratyajay, he is not talking about Paradharma, because you cannot reject what is intrinsic to you. But he's saying you abandon all the different kinds of Swadharma, Mamekam Sharanam Bhaj, which is your Paradharma. And then he says you will get complete protection. So this is an summary understanding of what is Swadharma, what is Paradharma, how do they relate to one another, and how do they relate to the three sections of the Bhagavad Gita. So I'll pause here. Venkat Prabhu, you had a question?
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. I really enjoyed the summary and everything. This is my first time going to any kind of Bhagavad Gita class, so I learned a lot. And hope you can hear me, right, sir?
Yes, Prabhu, I can hear you.
Yeah. And my question is, I heard one kind of a stranger in Bhagavad Gita somewhere in radio or something. Maybe my understanding is wrong. I need little bit explanation there. One place I heard that Sri Krishna says to Arjuna that Swadharmo Nidanam Shreyaha Paradharmo Bhayavaha. So it's almost as if he's saying that Swadharma is the one you should do. You cannot follow Paradharma because it is going to take you to, because the way I understood was he was telling Arjuna that you need to follow your dharma, which is Kshatriya. You are trying to leave all of it and doing like sannyasic or brahmanic things you are stating, which is not your dharma. So that is not going to give you, you explained things before if we leave this Swadharma. So, but you are saying here Paradharma is something different. So can you explain it a little bit, Prabhuji?
Sure, thank you. It's a good question. So what we will see in Bhagavad Gita is that Krishna will take Arjuna through successively deeper levels of realizations. So he does not start off the Gita by saying that you surrender unto me and your life will be perfect. Then Bhagavad Gita would be a single verse composition. But he takes Arjuna to different levels of realizations. So better than being impious is to be pious, which is you follow your swadharma. That's the point that he made to defeat Arjun's arguments, that I don't want to fight. And Krishna is saying your dharma is to fight. Now dharma is talking about there is swadharma, that your dharma is to fight as a Kshatriya. So you fight. But the important thing in Bhagavad Gita is to understand every statement made by Krishna in the context of where it appears. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also makes this point to Arjun that if you consider the body to be composed of chemicals without a soul, there is no need for you to lament. Now, of course, Krishna is not subscribing to that notion, but he is taking Arjun to different levels of understanding. And he takes from one level to the next higher level, that no, your body is not a bag of chemicals, but it is a body which is a bag of chemicals with a soul that is energizing. But then he says there is duty that is attached to that body, which is swadharma. And then later he says that, but this whole proposition of swadharma is going to give you temporary happiness. So let me take you to something higher. And then he takes him to the platform of paradharma. So important for us to look at the conversation in a broader context. Otherwise, if we take a snippet of the conversation and use that to establish an inference, we will probably not come to the correct conclusion. Okay. Somu Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. I have.
Thank you, Ji.
Yeah, I have a question, and this might be based on my shallow understanding of the definition of karma versus bhakti. But I guess the question is, are these like the karma, bhakti, and jnana, are these compartmentalized completely, or is there an overlap? And the reason I ask is, for example, somebody, a Maharaj that's at the temple, he is performing bhakti yoga, but there is a lot of karma that is associated with performing bhakti, right? If you just think about it in the context of running a temple, or even the so there's lots of work, karma involved in that. So are these completely compartmentalized, or is there overlap between the three, between karma, bhakti, and gyan?
There is a lot of overlap between them because essentially bhakti is nothing but karma that is performed with gyan. Right. So when we establish when Krishna established the premise of Buddhi Yoga, then he basically said that karma with Sankhya, with Gyan, becomes Buddhi Yoga. So two people may be doing exactly the same activity, and for one person that activity is karma, for the second person the activity is bhakti, and the difference is that where is the consciousness of the person. So even in a temple, we see that people come and do service, and there are some people who come and they do service, so they are doing volunteer service, but they're doing it for different reasons. Some of them come for camaraderie, some of them come for material results. They come and they have this understanding, they're pious, but they have this understanding that they do some service at the temple, they will have good health or prosperity. Another person standing right next to them may be doing exactly the same activity, but his consciousness is that this is just my offering to Krishna. Right? So they're completely fungible. The thing that distinguishes them is what is the consciousness of the person who is executing them.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Seema, Dhaval?
Prabhuji, I just have a question about the karma. I mean, the way I kind of understand it's just the totality of your actions of the past, present, and future. And as you explain about the dharma, which are duties one follows, so what exactly comes first in terms of dharma or karma, and how does that influence? I mean, if our duties is influenced by our karma, then does that really come? I mean, just like kind of understanding how does it work really? Which one comes first based on our karmic effects?
Sure, thank you, Prabhu. It's a little difficult to say which comes both because it's a cycle. That's why they say cycle of karma. So based on my activities, let's assume I take birth as a Kshatriya warrior. Now I have a dharma that is attached to being a Kshatriya and a warrior. And then based on that Swadharma, I perform activities. Maybe I fight with chivalry, and then I get the position of a demigod. Based on the position of a demigod, I have some karma. So they feed into one another. And that's why it's a cycle. That based on your dharma, you have karma, and based on your karma, you get your dharma. And there is of course free will also, that you may choose to follow it or not, which is why pious and impious activities happen. And it is in contrast with your paradharma, that it's intrinsic. Whether you do good things or bad things, whether you're favorable to a particular activity or not, whether your swabhav is brahmanical or kshatriya, does not matter. The paradharma is the same. The yato bhakti radok sajay, devotional service. That's not predicated on anything external. But otherwise, yes, there is this cycle of karma that is constantly giving you different bodies, different positions in which you execute different activities, you get different dharmas that in turn will determine your subsequent activities or non-performance of activities.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, so moving on. I'm able to move on. Why is it not moving on? Okay. So we now reach the fifth section, the last section of the chapter, where Krishna has explained to Arjuna. He has explained Sankhya, he has explained Karma, and he has explained Buddhi Yoga and glorifies Buddhi Yoga. That it's great, it's wonderful, it's the best thing. So Arjuna, being a practical person, says that, how do I recognize a person who is situated in Buddhi Yoga? So Sthita means situated. Sthita Pragya means how is a person who is situated in this? What are the symptoms of such a person? How does he react? So two things. Through this, one can understand within themselves if they are in that situation, and they can also recognize in other people so that they can take guidance or shelter. So Krishna explains 4 symptoms of such persons. So how is such a person situated? He has given up the pursuit of material desires. Why? For obvious reasons, that now he is situated at the platform of the soul. So he has given up the pursuit of material desires. How does he react and respond? So he is the same in misery and happiness. Why? Because he is detached from the cycle of karma. So misery and happiness are the results of your past karmic activities. But now the person is no longer situated on the platform of karma. So whether by the will of providence misery is coming his way or happiness is coming way, he knows it has nothing to do with him as a soul. So he does not rejoice when things go his way, and he does not become despondent when things do not go his way. How does he control his senses? So the first two were from the perspective of karma. The second two was from the perspective of jnana. So Arjuna asked this question because he knows that to practice Sankhya, to practice Gyan, you have to have complete control on the senses. But Krishna says that nope, he controls his senses by experiencing a higher taste. He does not withdraw his senses. He does not curtail his senses. But he engages his senses by experiencing a higher taste. So what is the higher taste? The higher taste in acting without any fruitive desires. The higher taste in acting without expecting results or glorification. And the higher taste in devotional service. And ultimately, how is he engaged? So he is engaged in devotional service, free from all bhakti. So the first two items, the first two symptoms are how does he react to the cycle of the whole confluence of karma that is happening around here. Because people who are invested in karma, they're strongly in the pursuit of material desires. That's what they know. This is how we can be happy. And then they're in the crest and the troughs of happiness and distress. Sometimes things go their way, sometimes things don't go there. But the person who is on this platform is detached from both of these. Now, a person who is following Gyan, he is trying very hard to control his senses. But a Sthita Pragya or a person following Bhakti Yoga, he does not have to control his senses. Well, he has to control one way, but he does not have to curtail his senses. He controls his senses by using them in the service of Krishna and his devotees. So whereas one person might want to eat, such a person will eat prasada. One person might like to sing because of fame or because of glory. This person will sing for the pleasure of Krishna. Same thing, different consciousness. And this is how he engages himself. So this is the end of the second chapter. I'll go over the, I think Chetan had a question, or was this from? Maybe.
Okay. Nearer, I had raised my hand.
I'm sorry, Prabhu?
I had raised my hand by mistake. It was not a question.
Okay, no worries. So summarizing that, how does the second chapter flow? It begins with Arjuna being overcome with doubts about his duty. And then we see Krishna addressing each of these doubts systematically. He introduces Arjuna to the notion of the soul, Sankhya Yoga, Gyan. He also stresses on the importance of doing one's own duty, karma, part of it. And he talks about the higher importance of executing the duty of the soul, which is the Bhakti Yoga. And then he talks about the symptoms and the benefits of being situated in this position. So this is the flow of the discussion in the second chapter. Be good to remember this. So as we go more and more chapters, as we remember these flows, then we can join them together and get the flow of the Gita. That in the first chapter, Arjuna had doubts. Second chapter, Krishna addresses each of these doubts. He introduced them to the nature of the soul, to karma. Third chapter, Krishna then speaks about this. So then we can establish the cadence of the entire Gita. So this is the end. Just to wrap up again, there are two verses to memorize. 212, Natuyam Jatu Nasham, the difference between body and the soul. 247, Karmaneva Dikaraste. And then the things to memorize. What are the 5 sections in the second chapter? What is Sankhya Yoga? What is karma? How does Krishna address each of Arjun's concerns? What is buddhi yoga? What is swadharma and paradharma? What is the flow? And these two verses. So I'll stop here. Pat, you had a question? Ravi Prabhu, you have a question?
Oh, sorry, I was speaking on mute.
Okay, no worries. Go ahead.
Sorry. I actually have a lot of questions, but I'll try to debate it myself in the weekend and see if I can minimize. Otherwise, it will take for hours.
Okay.
There are 2-3 observations, Prabhu. One is chapter 1 was easy, but chapter 2, and no wonder it is the summary, as you said, the contents of the Gita summarized. It is so intense, so deep that it just kind of questions keep popping up, which are kind of contradiction, I would call it. And maybe that's the little bit of conditioning that is there in the mind, or the way I've been brought up. But I guess that's how things will get sorted out slowly, because I mean, it's a profound conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. So it cannot be just 1 hour. A person like me would get any sense of it, actually. Forget about getting to the deeper level. Where I'm going with that is that first is just a sense of appreciation or observation. The way you speak, it just gives me the feeling, I don't know how to express it, that you have almost no contradiction. You've just kind of figured it out. While I'm just kind of more and more I'm listening, and more contradictions arising. That's just an observation. But I think it's a good way to also understand something, because you're not accepting on the prima facie, but you're not reasoning it out. You're reasoning it out, and yet having a faith. Sometime during the course of that reasoning, then you kind of accept it, and it makes sense without any reason. That's a kind of second or third observation. The fourth one is, why did Krishna, I mean, what is your opinion? Why would he summarize suddenly in chapter 2? He obviously knew that he's going to talk over 18 chapters. I mean, he is in chapter 1, which is probably an easy chapter. That's why no wonder I could figure it out, or at least understand it. But chapter 2 is so intense, then I'm getting confused between karma, dharma, the consciousness that is. When you talked about particularly the karma, bhakti, and gyan, the 3 aspects that you talked about overlapping with each other, and eventually it's a consciousness which probably is coming out of a wisdom or a gyan level of understanding, and that's why they're intertwined so well. I just have a little small question. I know I'm kind of babbling. What is actually Krishna consciousness? I understand a little bit of consciousness. If the consciousness is about gyan, and it's kind of double clicking from a karma to bhakti to gyan, and ultimately when you get that gyan, or that wisdom or a consciousness of as much as possible, and thereby the clarity becomes much deeper and deeper, and it becomes clearer. What is Krishna consciousness?
Thank you, Prabhu. Maybe I think this is an appropriate time to ask it also, because we just discussed Buddhi Yoga. Yeah. And Buddhi Yoga is the closest thing to Krishna consciousness. So Buddhi is mind consciousness. Yoga is that links us to Krishna. So Krishna consciousness is activities that we perform with the consciousness that they are meant for the pleasure of Krishna, that they're dedicated to Krishna, which is a more specific definition of bhakti. So when the acharyas, Srila Prabhupada, when they Rupa Goswami actually coined the term Krishna consciousness, they were more specific about the fact that Krishna consciousness, it is more inward looking than outward. That when one is situated in this platform of having the desire to serve Krishna, and in that consciousness, whatever activities one performs or does not perform, whatever decisions the person makes, all those are in the category of Krishna consciousness. So two people go out in the morning to do their job. One person does it, maybe pious. He's doing it saying that as a grahastha, as a husband, as a father, it is my duty to do this job and get money for my family. The other person is also going out for the job, but saying that I'm doing my job so that I can take care of my family, so that they can make spiritual advancements, so that they can help me get closer to Krishna, I can help them get close to Krishna. So I get some money by which I can serve the deities. I can take care of myself so that I can continue to serve the deities and the devotees. That is Krishna consciousness. So the emphasis is more on one's frame of mind. And I think you had raised this point, or Somu had raised this point, that we see renunciates or devotees also, that they are very busy. They're busy in, like for instance, we're trying to build a new temple, and then you see devotees are engaged in these highly bureaucratic activities. Going to the Montgomery County, filling up applications, talking to lawyers, getting clearances, and essentially they're building a building, but it's a building dedicated to Krishna. So that makes it, that's what is the understanding of Krishna consciousness. And I think the other points you made, firstly, thank you. I don't think I deserve the praise you're giving, but thank you for it. The second chapter is actually one of the more complicated chapters. And it is just, Prabhupada mentions that it is, so he gives the example, like if a scientist is writing a paper, they begin with an abstract that summarizes the paper, they write the paper, and then they give the conclusion at the end of the paper. And that's how things are explained. You start with a summary, you explain it, and then you conclude with the summary. The second chapter is a summary of everything that is going to come. The 18th chapter is another summary. Both second and 18th chapters are sister chapters. The second chapter explains in terms of what is going to come. The 18th chapter will explain in terms of what I have already spoken, but essentially to re-emphasize that. The good news is that things will get better after this. Third chapter is a lot more easier than.
There's just another comment. Sorry, taking a little long time. There is an inherent, I call it an aha moment when I'm getting confused and I'm listening and something making sense, not in a logical way, but little more than the logic. Where that's science to spiritual, that level of transcendence or migration takes place. There is a little bit of an aha moment that comes in the heart. I don't know how to express it. It makes you feel good. It's complex yet so simple. It is so simple yet nothing you can figure it out. And then it just kind of gives a sense of awe, because it's the first time I'm doing this, Prabhu. And then I don't know. I can't thank you enough for the way you are articulating. You just shows your depth and understanding so deep. It bothers me to some extent, as if am I really listening to somebody, or somebody live, or it's a dream I'm having. So That's a very profound appreciation. I just want to share my appreciation with you. It just makes me feel tremendous depth you have in every aspect of it. I have never heard this before.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you for the kind words. I see Ravi Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. My Prabhuji, my question is like, in the first chapter, Arjun asked 5 questions and Krishna answered 4 of them. Like, and what was Arjuna's indecision? Is it just he doesn't know what to do because with so many things around he was confused, or any specific what is the root reason behind his indecision, or what is he like what root reason behind his indecision? And in chapter 2, because initially when you explained the 4 reasons answered, that was clear, but after explaining dharma, swadharma and paradharma and this whole thing, is the 5th question answered in chapter 2, Prabhuji, by Krishna?
It's not answered. So like I said, I took a little bit of a risk, Prabhu, that I did. So the difference between swadharma and paradharma is not explicitly explained in the 2nd chapter. It is implicitly mentioned. When Krishna introduces the concept of Buddhi Yoga, then he's introducing the concept of paradharma, right? And when he speaks about duty, he's talking about swadharma at that point. So he has introduced it implicitly, but not to the depth that I went. And the reason I went to it is because, of course, we are in a group of practicing devotees who already have some foundation, and it will help a lot having this distinction clear in the mind of how these things, 2 aspects of dharma, they interact with one another. Because like I said, the prefixes don't appear. Dharma will appear for swadharma and paradharma. It is up to us to derive it based on the context. And in the 3rd chapter, dharma will appear in the context of swadharma. There, right? Later on in the 9th chapter, 12th chapter, dharma will appear in the context of paradharma. But they're still called dharma. I think in terms of the indecisiveness, so this is so different ways to understand it. It's like inspiration from at a level of the soul or the super soul, because Arjun was giving all strong arguments. He was speaking from the scriptures, but yet he was not satisfied. He himself was not satisfied by his points. It's like in the Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasadeva, he composed the entire Vedas. And then he says that I have lived according to all the injunctions. I worship the scriptures, worship my guru, everything I've done, but yet I'm not happy. So it's something that is intrinsic. We also have experience of it. That we may be doing things, they're all right, but still it does not give us that feeling of satiation, the feeling of being properly satisfied. And actually it is that indescribable feeling which we can quantify now. It is because of his lack of connection with Krishna that Krishna will speak the rest of the Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna is not recognizing it. He is recognizing it symptomatically, that I feel unhappy. I don't feel happy. And Krishna does not come right away and say, this is your, for the other things he says right away. But because this is so deep and subtle, he does not give it right away because it won't be accepted right away. But he will walk Arjun and us down to the path of what all you can do, what all you will get, what are the shortcomings, and what can you ultimately do to address that feeling of indecisiveness.
Thank you, Prabhuji. I think in a way Arjun is saying that, although he is putting in form of question saying that these are the reasons I won't do it, but he is kind of saying that all I am doing is right, like it's religious this and that. But still, if that indecision is not there, other questions will not come. Like, correct, Prabhuji? Because he's not satisfied at heart, that's why he is giving other reasons also and saying that I won't.
Right. So he's asking those questions, but they do not encapsulate the essence of his indecisiveness. They're more of symptoms. Because of the indecisiveness, he's asking these questions and may ask other questions later on. We'll ask several questions later on. But ultimately, through this process of question and answer, Arjun will allow Krishna to guide him to the root cause of his indecisiveness.
Thank you.
Okay. Chetan Prabhu, have you accidentally, is this?
Yeah. No, I have a question. This short
Okay.
one.
Go ahead.
Prabhu, so is paradharma, which you referred to, is it the same? Is it same as Krishna karma? I've heard that term also.
It's the same. They use different terms. Sometimes they'll call it Bhagavad Dharma. Sometimes they'll call it Krishna Dharma. Sometimes they'll call it just Dharma. So the reason that we choose the word or we prioritize the word Paradharma is because in the Bhagavatam, it is explicitly stated. Savai Pumsha Paro Dharmo Eto Bhakti Radhokseve. So there explicitly it is given as the essence of devotion to Krishna. But all the other terms, including Buddhi Yoga, they're all synonymous.
Yeah, Prabhu, the reason I asked is because like Venkata Prabhu earlier had asked, no, that he quoted the slok. I Googled it, it's 3.35, where Swadharma and Paradharma is used to mean like dharma of others, whereas this Paradharma is like, keeping Krishna center. So
Right.
that's why.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So context is important.
Yeah.
Words are words, but context is important.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll stop here. Realize we are way over time. So we have a volunteer for. I should stop recording.